Hey there, and welcome back to the Not Just Cruising YouTube channel. I am your host, Scotty P, and today we're going to be getting into the top 3 cruise news items that I found for you guys. Carnival has had a fire on board. Royal Caribbean has had to cancel sailings due to a technical difficulty, and unfortunately 2 crew members passed away in an engineering incident. Let's get into it. Oh wait, roll the intro. Before, I am trying to make these as easy as possible on myself, so I'm going to be doing a little less editing and you guys are going to see a little more of behind the scenes. So on to cruise news item number 1, the Carnival Freedom has caught fire. This incident happened on March 23rd. Luckily, it was just the funnel, the Carnival, the famous funnel that caught fire. The incident was reported around 3:15 p.m. on March 23rd. Allegedly, according to some passengers on board, this incident was caused by a lightning strike. Let's see. The fire did cause a cancellation of the stop they were going to have at Princess Cay, obviously, understandably. There's a fire on board. Fire is the biggest risk for a cruise ship, so it makes sense that after a fire they would cancel the port. Let's see. Carnival said, quote, "The ship's fire response was quickly activated and the ship's captain also turned the vessel towards the heavy rain in the area to maximize the efforts to put out the flames." So clearly, Carnival responded very quickly and very thoroughly to make sure that this fire was put out and didn't spread and cause a risk to the passengers on board. The cause of the fire is unknown at this time, but passengers, like I said earlier, passengers are claiming that it was a lightning strike. One passenger said, "It was storming and the loudest thunder and lightning boom I've ever heard happened. Just a few minutes later, we saw smoke and fire coming out." So obviously a really scary situation to be in. Ships, despite being in the middle of the ocean, are extremely susceptible to fire, and it's a huge concern on board cruise ships. The fire crew does train basically daily on putting out fires like this. So it seems like Carnival did a good job responding. Guests were asked to stay away from the outside decks and away from their balconies or off of their balconies while the fire was happening. Reportedly, part of the funnel did fall onto deck number 10. The fire was extinguished at 5:10 p.m., about 2 hours after it started. So like I said, pretty quick response from Carnival, and the fire crew did their very best. Obviously, the captain also steered the ship into the rain to try to help the fire crew, but the fire was only happening for about 2 hours, so not too bad. The current voyage will arrive back in port on March 25th, as it is scheduled, and apparently Carnival has not canceled any of the further sailings that are happening after this one. It seems that the ship will continue. Kind of interesting considering the damage that happened to the ship. And this actually, surprisingly, isn't the first time that the Carnival Freedom has caught fire. Carnival Freedom caught fire back in 2022, and it was in the exact same spot. It was the funnel. I think it was the opposite side of the funnel that this happened on, but still, nonetheless, it was the funnel that caught fire. I couldn't find any reports of what happened in that fire, like why the ship caught fire. But yeah, this is the second time the ship has caught fire in the last 2 years. And that's, that's pretty concerning considering the fact that, ships or fires on ships are really rare considering how many cruise ships are out there and how many ships are sailing at a time. And for one ship to have 2 fires within such a short period is concerning. So comment below, is this a ship that you guys would consider going on? I assume that the tickets for this ship will be pretty cheap following this. I've seen similar things happen, like on the Elation, after they had a gastrointestinal breakout, tickets on board were extremely cheap, like $50 per person for a whole 4-night cruise cheap. But yeah, would you guys consider going on this cruise after this has been happening so frequently? Let me know in the comments down below. Before we get on to cruise news item number 2, let me ask you guys, let me implore you guys to subscribe to this channel. It really does help us out. If you love cruising, if you love cruise content, and you want to stay up to date with the cruise news that I find interesting, please hit that subscribe button, hit the little like button, hit the little bell, do all the things. It really helps the channel out. To cruise news item number 2, Royal Caribbean has announced that they will be canceling some future sailings on the Brilliance of the Seas. This comes after an incident on board, an engineering failure where the ship is having issues with propulsion. Reportedly, passengers on board the Brilliance of the Seas are being forced to return back to port in Sydney, Australia because of the technical problem affecting the ship's propulsion. The ship was slated to depart on March 30th on a 4-night cruise to Tasmania, and that cruise has been canceled. The cruise that the ship is on now is an 11-night South Pacific cruise, and once the propulsion issue was noticed, the ship then canceled all of its calls in the ports that it hadn't reached yet and decided to head back to Sydney early. This obviously is disappointing for the passengers on board. However, Royal Caribbean is saying that they will be giving full compensation they will be giving a full refund for this cruise. So, I mean, basically these passengers get to cruise on a 5 or 6 night cruise for free. Not too bad of a deal. It does suck that their vacation was cut short. Royal Caribbean said, quote, Brilliance of the Seas experienced a technical issue on its last sailing and we're returning to port early to begin required maintenance. Our crew has started working on restoring the system and we're deploying the best experts. Despite our efforts, we are unable to complete the needed repairs to be ready in time for our March 30th, 2024 sailing. That really sucks for the people that were going to go on this ship after this sailing for the 4-night Tasmania cruise. You know, Australia doesn't really have a lot of options when it comes to cruise ships. Cruise ships kind of come and go in Australia, I guess as they do in most ports. But because of Australia's kind of isolated position in the world, there's not a ton of cruise ships to sail on, and they're generally the same ships. So it sucks for these people that their cruise was canceled. Passengers who booked travel through Royal Caribbean on the current sailing will be compensated and they will be able to make travel arrangements. However, if you did not book through Royal Caribbean and you traveled independently, you are on your own, and Royal Caribbean has said to reach out to the airlines, the people that you had your flight home booked with, and see if you can get home a little early. And like I always say when this happened, and this has been happening more and more often recently, you have to get travel insurance. If you're booking your flights independently of a cruise line, please get travel insurance, because you never know what's going to happen. Well, this episode of Cruise News has been pretty sad, and it will continue to be sad with this third story. This third story is very tragic. 2 crew members perished on Holland America's, I don't know how to pronounce the name of the ship, New Amsterdam. Apparently it was an engineering incident on board. This happened while the ship was on a 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruise from Fort Lauderdale. The incident was reported early in the morning before 9 a.m. and it was described as a steam leak. Now, from what I've read, this could mean a lot of things, but either way, it sounds like a terrible way to go, and I really feel for the crew members on board and their families, obviously. The incident happened while the ship was docked in Half Moon Cay, and the ship was delayed leaving port. So it looks like this is going to affect the next cruise. However, Holland America has not canceled the next cruise altogether. It says all passengers are safe and the ship is returning to its home port of Fort Lauderdale. I think this happened towards the end of their cruise, so it's not going to actually affect the schedule. But this is absolutely tragic. You know, anybody losing their lives out at sea, especially crew members who work very hard to keep the ship going and to keep all the entertainment going and to keep us having a good vacation. To hear that a couple of them perished because of an unforeseen incident on board is just tragic. Holland America said, quote, "We regret to share that while calling at Half Moon Cay, the Bahamas, there was an incident in an engineering space on board New Amsterdam, which sadly resulted in the death of 2 crew members." The statement reads, "The appropriate authorities were notified and the cause of the incident is currently being investigated." So hopefully once the ship gets back to port, investigators will hop on board and be able to figure out what happened and prevent something terrible like this from happening again. No personal details have been released about the crew in order to protect their friends and families and of the people that perished in this incident. Yeah, just a really sad story. The ship still seems to be intact, and it will not affect the ship's structural integrity. Obviously, the ship is still able to return back to Fort Lauderdale. It doesn't seem like Holland America is going to cancel the next cruise, like I said earlier. However, it does seem that passengers boarding for the next cruise might experience some delays because the ship did have to leave Half Moon Cay about 3 hours late, and it also had to sail into some pretty rough seas on its way back to Fort Lauderdale after that. Not to mention the fact that investigators are going to have to come on board in Fort Lauderdale and investigate the incident and what happened. So if you're a passenger getting on the Holland America New Amsterdam for its next sailing, it will more than likely be delayed. So just a really sad incident all around, really tragic to hear, and I pray for the families and friends of the 2 crew members that lost their lives. Well, that is it for today's episode of Cruise News, a pretty somber and sad day of cruise news. With that said, I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.